Let me make one more point before you move on. I think you made another very important point. You said this is the Democrats' health plan.
Yeah.
And that's really too bad. There is not a drop of Republican ink on the 1,100-page bill. That bill moved through 3 committees in this body, in this House, and Republicans tried repeatedly to make amendments, but without success. The amendments failed largely on a party line vote. And so we have a Democrats' bill. And it seems to me,
gentlemen, I can't help but interrupt you just there for a minute, because I have heard repeatedly it said that, and particularly by the President, he said the Republicans don't have any alternatives or options, and yet the fact is there are dozens of Republican bills, and none of them were put into any of this.
Yeah, I thank the gentleman. That's an excellent point. But it seems to me that we should not be at a point where we are competing the Democrats' 1,100-page bill with presumably the Republicans' 800-page bill or 900-page bill or 1,000-page bill. What we should do to get a bipartisan solution is take that whole 1,100 pages and push it off, set the bills that have been introduced, push them aside, and sit down and see where Republicans and Democrats could actually agree on something, like a Republican proposal we've discussed many times, is allowing young people to stay on their parents' insurance until they're 25 years old. And if you just did that one thing, if we sat down, Republicans and Democrats, and said, we're going to push all this aside, we're going to push the reset button, and we're going to agree on this one thing, you would take 7 million of the uninsured and they'd be insured. And there are many things we could agree on, but not dealing with that.
And just reclaim my time for a minute. What you're suggesting, gentlemen, is it's almost too common sense for us to do. You know, one of the ways that when we do create good legislation, usually there's a good consensus, and the minority and majority parties work together. They put stuff together and say, well, this is the stuff we can't agree to, this stuff other people can't agree to, but together, let's take a piece of the problem and solve it. Instead, what this is an attempt to do is to take 1/5 of our economy and federalize it. And that's a pretty ambitious step, even if everybody agreed this would be an ambitious step. And in this case, not one Republican agrees, in the House or Senate, from what I know. And even if they did, this would be a very ambitious to try to rewrite 18% of the U.S. economy and federalize the whole thing. That's a pretty ambitious thing to do.
Well, if the gentleman would yield again, let me pick up on this point of a bipartisan effort. I serve also on the Armed Services Committee, as the gentleman knows. And you'll recall that earlier this year, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, the distinguished gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Skelton, and the then ranking Republican member, the gentleman from New York, Mr. McHugh, said we ought to see if we can do something about the defense acquisition system. Everybody knows that it is a mess. Hundreds of dollars for hammers, huge cost overruns. We need to fix that system. And if you'll recall, the approach was to get some Republicans and some Democrats to sit down, and our friend from New Jersey, Rob Andrews, was chosen to represent the Democrats, and our friend Michael Conaway from Texas was chosen. They sat down together and they wrote legislation.
Actually solved some problems.
It actually solved some problems, and you'll recall that when they finished, they had a pretty good bill. We had legislative hearings on it. Experts agreed that it would help, and it passed that committee unanimously.
Ran right through.
And it should, because that's the way to solve the problem. You cannot take, behind closed doors, one party, go write a bill, an 1,100-page bill, at a cost that, it depends on what given moment you're looking at it, but it's somewhere well over $1 trillion, and present it and then say, frankly, as the President did, well, I'm open to suggestions. Well, the best suggestion I would offer to the President and to my colleagues, the majority party here, is let's set that aside and sit down and see if there's something we can't agree on here.